Hello, I am Chante Cox-Boyd, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about social psychology, which is a course that I will be teaching in the fall. Now, in order to take this course, there are no prerequisites, but this is indeed a field that's going to apply to a variety of majors, so everybody can learn a little bit of something from taking this course. Now, the field of social psychology really focuses on the individual and how they interact and are influenced by their social environment. I'm going to share a few slides with you just to give you a feel of some of the different topics that we will cover in this class. Now, the first thing that we're going to look at, again, in looking at social psychology, is the fact that construal is something that is very important to us, and how when we analyze situations, when we make judgments, there are really just no objective things, but our perceptions is really what matters. So we'll talk a good bit about the importance of the way an individual actually perceives their social environment. So in general, there are different ways of thinking. Our thoughts can be classified as either automatic or thoughts that are more effortful. And what you'll find is that sometimes when it comes to judging people, we kind of get caught up into this automatic thinking. So this leads us to do things such as rely on stereotypes when it comes to making judgments about people. Now, stereotypes, when we talk about those, are really nothing more than schemas. Schemas are these mental structures that we use to think about information. For instance, you might have a schema of what a person who is from Texas is like, and that schema might entail what they do in their spare time, what they eat, what their attitudes are, or even the types of homes in which they live. You have schemas about the roles that people play. For example, a mother's role might be one of cooking and nurturing and taking care of her kids. But we also have schemas about different events, meaning you have expectations of when you go to a restaurant, for example, you automatically know what to do. You know, there's an order to things. Now, this is automatic thinking, as I said, and especially in the case of stereotypes, it's not always accurate, but people have a tendency to rely on this type of information. And in this course, we'll go over some of the biases that come into play and really what you can do to get rid of this automatic thinking. Now, another area of this class that we'll talk about really has to do with relationships, our relations with other people, how they oftentimes come about from those earliest interactions that we have with our parents, but we'll focus on what attracts us to others, you know, not just the attraction, but also the maintenance of those relationships. These days, a lot of the research in social psychology has had to sort of acknowledge now that many people are meeting mates online. So usually being close to someone, proximity is one of those major findings that's linked with attraction, but exploring whether or not that still holds when we go to an online world. Do we still want partners who are similar to us or even familiar to us? Because when people are familiar to us, we're more soothed and we're not as fearful. We have a tendency to like them even more. Now, in addition to looking at what attracts us to our partners, we'll talk about how relationships are maintained and how sadly many relationships end up falling apart. There are stages to relationship dissolution, and each person goes through these stages until hopefully at the end they could come up with some resolution in terms of accepting that that relationship is no longer there. Now, another topic area that we will focus on is stress and health. As you know, many of us are stressed these days, and the way we handle that stress really differs. It is an individual situation. The same situations that might stress some may not stress others in the same manner. But we'll talk about the impact of stress on our health, both mental as well as physical, and address some of the ways of coping with stress. Another subtopic that is relevant in our course is that of aggression. So we talk about helping people, but we also talk about hurting people. And you will find that there are gender differences in both of those things. So for instance, with helping, men tend to help at one time where they can be the hero, they do these large things, whereas women get caught up more into long-term means of helping. Now, with regard to gender, many have noticed that there might be differences in the way that males and females express their aggression. Many believe males are more aggressive than females, but if you really look at the statistics, it really shows that the type of aggression displayed by both genders really differs, with males being more overtly aggressive and females being a little bit more indirect. They engage in more relational types of aggression. Now, working in groups and looking at how the social group impacts an individual is another big part of the course. So we look at the way that groups are individuals are impacted by being in a group. And what we do know is that being in a group oftentimes leads to worse behavior. Worse in the terms of problem solving, but also in terms of deviant types of behavior. One thing that happens as a result of being in a group is the notion of social loafing, so that each individual decreases how hard they work in certain situations, whereas other situations, sometimes being with the group, can actually make you perform even better. Now, I mentioned that groups can sometimes lead to more deviant behavior. So when people get caught up in group dynamics, they feel as if they're anonymous. They are more willing to pick up the goals of the group, and they may not act in accord with their own values. So you may see a group of people going into a store and stealing or throwing rocks or protesting, and their goal is to do what the group is doing, not to do what they themselves are doing. So social influence is huge in this particular class. We'll talk about how people obey authority figures, but also how they're influenced by others, how they conform to the norms of other people. Sometimes having other people around to guide us and show us what to do is a great thing. When you don't know what to do, you can look to others who are more knowledgeable in a situation, and that could get you by. But in other cases, following the behavior of others can be quite detrimental to you. Now, the last part of the book, we have a few applied chapters that we'll discuss. One in particular is looking at the dynamics of social psych as it applies to the courtroom. One thing you'll find out with the courtroom is that many people are oftentimes convicted every year, and they're put in there falsely due to eyewitness testimony. Now, many of these eyewitnesses truly might think that they have picked the correct person. But what we know and what we will talk about in this class is why eyewitnesses can be wrong. And this is simple as the way we judge people. When you're looking at people who are in the out group, we have this tendency to see them as being alike. Now, this touches back on the notion of stereotypes. You see them as looking alike, and if you don't have the opportunities to interact and get to know people, you really can't really discriminate one person who is in that group from another. And in a courtroom setting, this could lead to people falsely choosing an individual who is outside of their group as then the perpetrator of the crime, when really the problem is that they have not attended enough to individuating differences that they're actually able to look at differences in people. So the idea here is, with social psychology, we will look at how we ourselves make judgments. We'll look at how we think about ourselves in terms of self-esteem, how we're influenced by those of us who are around us, and how ultimately that influence can lead to some very significant effects when we look at some of the applied information that is available. But anyway, that is a general synopsis of some of the topics that we're going to cover in social psych. Again, I think just understanding and learning about people, and also learning about yourself and how you can oftentimes make these judgments, it's really going to be something valuable to you, regardless of your major or whatever area you wish to pursue later in life. So good luck.